On this episode of Forge and Anvil, Kamala Harris says the quiet part out loud in a speech by mentioning the climate cult's desire to reduce population. Next, we'll talk all about how MSNBC thinks you're a Nazi if you work out, and how we've also got some poisonous chemicals in nearly half of all America's tap water. From there, we'll break down Trump's recent remarks implying that he may want to arm Ukraine with more weapons than they ever got if Putin doesn't end the war. All this and more, so stick around. My name is Connor, and I am host of this podcast. If you have not already followed us on Twitter, be sure to do so you can get more great content like the meme you see here. We did go ahead and put in our request to be verified with Twitter Blue, so we're finally going to be big, important people, so be sure to follow us there at Forge and A. I am joined tonight by two first-time guests. The first one, our prayers were answered. Wade did make it onto the show. VP did not knock him off. So, Wade, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. Thank you guys for your prayers.
And congratulations on making the show and not being murdered.
Yeah. Kamala was close. Yeah. There were some close calls, but I won't go into it. But yeah, I'm Wade. I'm from I host the Wade Show with Wade on YouTube. Wade Stotts is my name. So yeah, I'm privileged to be here. I do a lot of work with Canon Press. For those familiar with that, we do a lot of Christian discipleship resources, and Canon Plus is our media wing. And yeah, I'm, like I said, glad to be on Forge and Anvil.
Awesome. Welcome. Well, the real reason why you survived is you did not have information that would lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton. So we are glad that you are here. And I'm joined again by my co-host, Michael Aper. So, Michael, say hello.
Hi, friends. Back at it again. I'm a student of Scripture. I want to see the righteousness of God restored to the men of God. And we can take that one step at a time here by hashing out hard conversations.
Awesome. And last but not least, first-time guest, Matt Reynolds.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Barbell Logic. We're one of the larger online coaching companies, strength coaching companies in the world. I got my start in competitive powerlifting and won my pro card in strongman and toured on the World Strongest Man circuit back in 2006 to 2010. And so we're a pretty good sized company now with about 100 employees and a couple thousand clients, and big fan of you guys, big fan of Canon Press for sure. And so I'm excited for the conversation today.
Awesome. Well, welcome on. We'll go ahead and dive straight into our first story of the night. So this is from the Daily Wire. Kamala Harris roasted after suggesting population reduction to help the environment. Vice President Kamala Harris was roasted this week after she said that population reduction was a way to ensure that future generations would be able to have clean air and water. Harris made the remarks at Coppin State University in Baltimore, Maryland, during a speech where she discussed the designation of $20 billion towards green energy products. So let's go ahead and just roll the clip and let Kamala speak for herself here.
Think about the impact on something like public health. When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
Now, that clean water part, we'll potentially have to debate that later on in the evening. But when I first saw this, I thought it was pretty hilarious because, again, this was 100% just saying the quiet part out loud. It's no secret that the climate cult, as we refer to them, have been very interested in reducing the population. And as we'll discuss throughout the night, it seems that they may be getting their wish one way or another. But Wade, I'll turn it over to you. What was your initial reaction to Kamala here?
Yeah, I think even aside from the content, there's always Kamala's tone, that like talking down and explaining tone is just so obnoxious. I can't listen, really just focus. I can't focus even on the content. It's just so distracting how like pedantic she is just about the simplest things.
I don't think she can focus on the content either. So
she's also focused on the tone.
Right, exactly. Well, she needs to focus probably a little more. But anyway, it's absolutely what she wants, even if she didn't mean to say that, even if the prompter didn't say exactly that. But it's and I think that if all we have left after all of this is just a bunch of Kamala Harrises walking around. If population decline leads to just a bunch of people who think and talk and act like Kamala Harris, I think
Idiocracy.
it's scary.
They made a movie about it.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's got electrolytes. Yeah, I've got some points right over here. So yeah, no, it was definitely a bizarre thing to hear her say, but again, just I couldn't get past the tone.
Hello, Shara. Yeah, Matt, what was your initial reaction?
So I heard that they've since changed it, and they said, she was supposed to say pollution, not population. But again, whether she was supposed to say that or not, I think it was one of these things that she's so ingrained. It's so ingrained in her brain to talk about reducing population that's the. So it's funny. I have sort of a serious take on this, which is, we've seen what China has done over the past several decades, and they're done. I mean, there was a real concern about them being the next world power, and probably the singular greatest reason that they won't be is because they keep having one child for every two people. And so they're in real trouble in another 20 or 30 years. And so they're done. On the other side, from my perspective, I'm called to be fruitful and multiply and take dominion. And so if people like Kamala want to stop having children and let us knock out a whole bunch of them and give me 40 grandbabies, yeah, man, I'll build into Christendom and build the kingdom of God. That I'm like, so there's a part of me that's like, yeah, sure. If all you lefties, all you woke people want to stop having babies, I'm actually okay with that. Let's see what the world looks like in 20 years when the rest of us decide to start having, we have a bunch of kiddos, and then our kiddos have a bunch of kiddos, and their kiddos have a bunch of kiddos, and we raise them right. So yeah, I just think, but both, I think this is the post-mill guy in me saying like this actually is while it is clearly they have a view that is anti-human. I mean, it's really what it is, and of course I think that's evil and sinful. But at the same light, I'm like, well, go ahead and scrape any cream that you have off the top and we'll take over. I'm okay with that. And so I see that both from the Christendom perspective, and I see it from we have real world examples of what China has done now that they just came out in the last couple of months. They were lying about the population, or they came out and something like they are not. India is bigger than China is at this point, and in another 20 or 30 years, that retirement demographic is going to be bigger than all of the other demographics in China, and they're in trouble. And so, I also love the part where she says, if we reduce population, more of our children will be able to drink.
Yeah.
How would more children get to drink clean water if we have less
that's
children?
On a percentage basis.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is, right? So let's get rid of all you conservatives so that more of our woke children can have clean water. Yeah, it's nuts.
Well, the reality is, you mentioned how they said they're trying to do some cleanup work, and they said it was supposed to be reduce pollution. It's like, well, the population is the pollution that they want to reduce.
Ooh,
that's just the way that they think about these things. But Michael, I wanted to turn it over to you for your initial take on VP.
Well, I would hearken with what the guys have already said, but in addition, I want to know. I mean, the obvious question. It's not like she's saying the quiet part out loud. This part has been said out loud for a long time now. And as we'll see on other topics, it's more than just an ideological trend. It's a dietary trend. It's in every product that we consume to some degree. And my question is, who is the population that's going to be reduced? Because it's clearly the target audience of Kamala saying this, which would, like Matt was saying, yeah, sure, the woke people, we can reduce them, let them stop having babies, and clearly the sexual ideology issues of our culture are leaning towards not procreating when men who are able to have children either destroy their bodies and become women, quote unquote women, or they're preferring male companionship and denying themselves the opportunity to procreate in that way. And same goes on the female to male side of that. So there's certainly ideological trends that are going towards sterilization of our culture. That's clear enough. I think that's a much more heavy-handed effort towards reducing population than just saying, oh yeah, we need to reduce the population. Well, the efforts have already been made for many years, both in our sexual identity as well as in the products that we consume, be it our water, the chemicals used in pesticides that goes into all of our food. That's a larger conversation that we can't get into at the moment, but I think there's a grand trend towards depopulating our community. And my question remains, who will be reduced? Is it going to be just the people who want to stop having kids? Or is it going to be people who want to have kids and are now unable to because of the contents of their bodies in addition to their ideological trends?
Yeah, it's definitely like a war on nature broadly, so that it's like a war on fruitfulness, which is part of just the general war on the world that God made, and thinking that that's a good thing, and that what we should do is steward it and keep it going. But yeah, thinking of fruitfulness as a poison, and thinking of like adding poison as as some kind of healthful thing, is totally consistent again with, if you hate God, then you're of course going to hate the things that he made and the way that they work. And so as they work themselves out, yeah, you're going to get kids. and if you don't, and if you hate nature, then obviously you're going to fight every single one of those ways in which the world continues to work the way that God made it.
Yeah, so
And even
it's
besides
clear to
the-
me. It's clear to me that we have we know this, that we actually have a calling. And I think we use that term a little bit too often, but we have a calling to be fruitful and multiply. And so there are things that we can do in our community to counteract this. Like certainly we can do the best we can following the laws of democracy and try to vote people like this out. Like that's obviously something that we should do. But at that macro level, at the federal level, those are things that we can do. But what we know we can do at the family, in that kind of spheres of influence that we have an opportunity to be fruitful and multiply. I want more kids. I want more grandkids. I want to build my church community and that local community. The more I can build that, and I can make. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make real change at the federal or macro level. I'm going to do what I can to take steps that direction, but I can make an immediate impact at the community level, right? And so at the family level, and so for us, I would look at this statement as horrific and sinful, anti-human, because I know you guys agree with this, that we're all created in the image of God. We can actually take a real stance against it in our actual lives. I think sometimes people look at this and they only look at it at the macro level, and they say, well, like, how can I do anything about this? Like, everybody I vote for loses, or whatever that thing is. But like, what, you can be fruitful and multiply. You can take dominion. You can lead your families well as husbands and fathers. These are the things that we can do. And so that, to me, that's the first place that we start.
Yeah. And she's making an environmental point, and obviously has the assumption that people are detriments to the environment. But the best thing in the world for the world is for the people that God put in charge of it to steward it wisely. And of course, are bad ways to steward creation. But getting rid of the people is getting rid of the people who are designed by God to take creation and use it and make it, again, do what it's supposed to find all the potential that's in there and push it forward, make better things, create amazing technology, and just push the world forward. And if you get rid of those people, then nature becomes, again, just like a showcase for the 5 people who are left to look at. and that's not the world that God made, and that's not why he made it.
By the way, I think you're bringing up a really good point there, Wade, that it's always been interesting to me that in general, environmentalism has been attributed to the left, and that sort of building big families and having more babies has been attributed to the right. And I absolutely think that we should be good stewards of the earth. I mean, these are things that we should do well for. And do I think we should spend $4 trillion to reduce the temperature, 0.2 of a degree? Like, of course not. That's ridiculous. But at the same time, I think we should do the best we can to steward what we've been given well, steward the land that we own. I think that property ownership is actually an important thing in our lives, in our communities, in our states where we live, and to steward that well. And so, I mean, it's a lesson that we're consistently trying to teach our children and our community, is like, we take care of our homes, we take care of our land, these are actually important things. It's weird that thing has become so polarized, and I think it's because of the tactics that the left has used to say this is how we take care of the environment. Well, let's have less people. Like, no, that's not the answer. There are things we can do to actually so I want to be clear. For me, it's always like, we don't throw trash on the ground, right? If you've ever been to a third world country and you go to Mexico and you go to Haiti or you go to India, it's like there's just trash everywhere. That's all. Right. That's also terrible. It's also sinful. It's also evil. We don't do that. And so taking care of what we've been given to steward, I think, is still really incredibly important. But the answer to that is to not have more babies. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, going back to something that you said about how the left is known for their environmentalism, I honestly think a lot of it's just due to a guilty conscience, because when you look at statistically speaking, people on the left are much more likely to live in a massive city. And it's these concrete jungles where you actually see the pollution at its worst. Yep. You see the smoggy cities, and you see the lack of greenery, and you see the trash on the sidewalks. I mean, if you see some of the latest footage that's been coming out of Philadelphia lately, I mean, it's like it genuinely looks like zombie apocalypse there. Yep. With the drug abuse and then just the trash everywhere and these homeless encampments. And I mean, the reality is most right-wing people are actually in the rural areas, and a lot of them are on small homesteads like the one I've got here, and we're the ones that are being talked down to like we're the great polluters, because we're these evil right-wingers who do everything for the corporations and pollute all of our oceans, when in reality the main issue with environmentalists, or I should say our harm that we've done on the environment, is population density. It's not a matter of having too many people. It's a matter of we stack them so tight together in these little clustered cities where we honestly do actually destroy the land. I think I recently saw that New York is like slowly shifting. I mean, it's like incredibly slow. It's like an inch every 100 years or something like that, but it's like slowly sinking into the ground just from the weight of the city itself. And it's like, I mean, New York's got a whole lot of open land in the northern part of the state, but we have these dense urban centers, and I'm not even against dense urban centers, but if we're gonna give credit to the environmentalist argument, at the end of the day, what they're arguing is population reduction, when in reality we just need to spread out a little bit more, and those who are preaching the loudest need to actually take a page out of a lot of our books and go and homestead, learn how to garden, do something with the land, do something holistic too. Read some Joel Salatin and learn how to do it right.
Yeah. By the way,
I butchered 68 chickens last Saturday with my 13-year-old daughter, so I've got a buddy who has a big 250 acre homestead, and he sold his business in Tulsa, moved about 40 minutes outside of Tulsa, and has a very Joel Salatin based, does the exact same sort of thing that Joel does. And so I've butchered chickens for several years out there. And my 13-year-old daughter was like, I think I want to try it. I don't know. I'm nervous. And so I said, well, just come out and watch. And, and so we did the first 5 or so, and she's like, all right, I'll do it. Here we go. Let's do it. And so, and that's what we did. Right. And so then that's the chickens that we eat. I don't go to Walmart and buy the chickens from Tyson Chicken, which is the multinational corporation that's an hour south of me. I'm in the Ozarks. And so like we are able to make those decisions in a way that you can't do that everywhere. Right. I mean, like we've talked about this as well as trying to support. It's impossible to only support Christian owned companies. Maybe it's not, but like I'm doing this on my MacBook, on my Apple, and I would prefer to not, but at some point I just really like Apple. I like MacBooks. And so, right. So there at some point, so I can choose not to shop at Target, and I can choose not to buy Bud Light, and I can choose not to go to, Starbucks and support Christian-owned companies who are building into Christendom. But At some point we can't, but what we can do is we can actually make these steps. I think, again, like you're saying, at the community level, at the family level, and make a real difference, at least for us and for our kids. And then the other thing is this: we're playing the long game, right? This is the other thing. The left has done this better than us for 50 or 60 or 100 years. They play the long game better than the right does. And so if more of the right would learn how to play the long game and stop thinking about, oh, what kind of world am I going to leave to my children, and think like, look, Jesus is on his throne and rules right now. And so I don't like, that's not the worry. That's not my worry. I can think in the long game. I can think about 2 generations, 3 generations, 5 generations, 10 generations beyond. Then it actually changes the way I actually live my life today. That's been a major change in our life over the last several years, is moving that direction.
Yeah.
There's some section in the Doug Jones wrote a book called Angels in the Architecture. And there's one section in there where he talks about city life being the kind of thing where if you're in the city all the time, then you're basically only surrounded by man's accomplishments. And as you get further away from that, you start to be more surrounded by God's design.
Yep.
And so if you're constantly surrounded by only man's accomplishments, you start to think pretty highly of man, because the best things you're seeing and the coolest stuff you've got is stuff that we did. And so, of course, the environmentalists are going to be probably more city localized. And so they're going to be thinking like, we can change all of this. We can stop it all. And we're going to,
and you also see the fallout, right? So they say, look at the thing that we built, but also look at the thing that has gone bad. And so I travel all the time for business. And again, I'm in the Ozarks. So I'll be on an airplane for 2 hours flying over the middle of the country, and there are no cities. It's nothing but green, right? In Springfield, Missouri, it's green, right? And you land in a city, and the city is a mess. And I can remember several years ago going to Portland or San Francisco or Oakland, and it was a disaster, and still a disaster. But what's crazy is that all the cities are like that now. So we went to Fight Laugh Feast in October in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I couldn't believe what Knoxville, Tennessee looked like. I'm like, there are hundreds and hundreds of homeless people under the overpasses in Knoxville. Like, this is what every city looks like now. And so every time I go to a city, I go, how does anybody live in this? Like, why would someone choose to live here when, we bought 10 acres. Our COVID project was we bought 10 acres up on the river, built the little cabin for the family, bought 10 acres for $30,000 in beautiful view overlooking 275-foot drop straight down to the river. That's what you get in Missouri. That's what you get. But if you want to live in lower Manhattan, that's what you're going to have. You're going to have to deal with this ridiculousness, or San Francisco or Portland, or even anywhere like Knoxville or St. Louis or Kansas City or Memphis. And so this is what we've seen, is the policy of the left has now branched out. Like, this thing that doesn't work. We started to see it in Portland and in LA and in Seattle, and now it's everywhere, and Missouri is a perfect case scenario. Like you said, if you look at the way every county in Missouri votes, it's every rural county's red, and St. Louis and Kansas City and Columbia, where the University of Missouri is blue.
Yeah, the blueberries and the chili. And
that's exactly right. And so now people, I think, are starting to see the problem. So there's another part of me that says, do I have any faith that says that people, the average moderate, who I don't really have the midwit, will they at some point look at this and go, oh, this is a complete disaster, what's going on in the cities, and what's going on in these rural areas is flourishing, and so they're moving in the right direction. So
I went to also on that point, I went to Austin during 2020, and this was when the lockdowns are pretty intense, and the only people I saw there were homeless people. So everything was closed. Nobody could be outside except for homeless people.
They weren't locked down.
And from what I understand, it's not stayed not gone that much different from then.
I think it's important to recognize throughout this conversation what Matt was discussing earlier of the stewardship that God has called us to. That's not reserved only for rural areas either. We can exercise stewardship in those cities, and maybe part of that stewardship is spreading out a little bit better so that they're not all on top of each other, and if there's a way that we can care for the homeless and the needy, that's clearly a biblical initiative as well. But the stewardship that we can have, even in a huge metropolitan area like that, there are some small examples of urban homesteads and the ability to do like high rise gardening and things like that, where there are some small groups that are trying to make a difference there. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
But clearly there are bigger issues in place with the infrastructure and the opportunities with our economic distribution that are inhibiting that ability.
I think Connor, you were saying earlier that New York City is like sinking into the sea. It's kind of crazy that like other stuff might kill New York City before that. But sinking into the sea is not the biggest problem in New York City.
right.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
Might not even be a top 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's go ahead and move on to our next story here, because a similar vein tonight is just the idea of I guess becoming a little bit more sovereign. But apparently to MSNBC, that's a bad idea. Pandemic fitness trends have gone extreme, literally. White supremacists' latest scheme to valorize violence and hypermasculinity has gone digital. It appears the far right has taken advantage of pandemic at-home fitness trends to expand its decade-plus radicalization of physical mixed martial arts, MMA, and combat sports spaces. Earlier this month, researchers reported that a network of online fascist fitness chat groups on the encrypted platform Telegram are recruiting and radicalizing young men with neo-Nazi and white supremacist extremist ideologies. Initially lured with health tips and strategies for positive physical changes, new recruits are later invited to closed chat groups where far-right content is shared. Physical fitness has always been central to the far right. In Mein Kampf, Hitler fixated on boxing and jiu-jitsu, believing they could help him create an army of millions whose aggressive spirit and impeccably trained bodies, combined with fanatic love of the fatherland, would do more for the German nation than any mediocre tactical weapons training. In more modern times, far-right groups have launched mixed martial arts and boxing gyms in Ukraine, Canada, and France, among other places, focused on training far-right nationalists in violent hand-to-hand combat and street fighting techniques. It's caught the attention of intelligence authorities, especially in Europe, where various reports have noted the role of combat sports and MMA in radicalizing and promoting far-right violence. A series of collaborative efforts between governments, national sports associations, and local gyms in places such as Germany, Poland, and the United Kingdom have introduced intervention and prevention programs. So there's definitely more to that article, and we can definitely rip it apart sentence by sentence if we would like. But I thought this article was hilarious because, first of all, just the Nazi associations are just so laughable at this point that all you can do is just get a deep chuckle out of this. But I find it hilarious that our first story was all about Kamala and depopulating, and then here they are promoting the idea that if you want to be physically fit, you're a Nazi. So ultimately, the message coming from the left and the corporate media and the main narrative gatekeepers is, if you want to be healthy, that's a no-no. You need to be depressed. You need to be a slob. You need to live in your high-rise apartment that's a 6x6, and you need to just breathe in smog the rest of your days. So
make sure you screw up those hormones so nothing can actually be productive.
Get addicted to opiates.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, Matt, we'll defer to you on this as someone who does a lot of far-right extremism.
Wait, are you offended?
Come on, man. What?
No, most people don't know this about me. I actually never got into fitness until I became a white supremacist. So I became a white supremacist first.
Okay, see, there we go.
Well, that's weird.
It is in fact probably true. Most of what I read here. Obviously this ridiculous. Our staff talked about this when it first came out, and my business is a secular business. I mean, we train anybody, and what I see out of this a lot of times. First of all, I will tie this back to the original article here in a minute, but what we see out of fitness is when people get into fitness or strength training in general, is they take personal responsibility for what they're doing, and that is not a core value of the left. It's honestly, it's that simple.
Yeah.
And so for us, I'm very blessed that my business, while it is a generally like we will train anybody. Like if anybody wants to join if anybody wants to be a client of ours and they're from any demographic or any political background or they're gay or whatever, like I actually think squatting and deadlifting will help people take responsibility for their actions regardless, and to step in the right direction. And so do I think it's the most important
conversion
thing?
therapy?
That's right. I don't think it's the most important thing in the world
that anymore.
But that's right. But I do think it helps people take some responsibility for their actions. And so I think it's a step in the right direction. And so while our business at Barbell Logic has tried to stay as much as we can apolitical and areligious, I'm very blessed that I've got a good team and investors and whatnot behind me that allow me to go on to shows like this and be able to speak a little more clearly about the way I feel about these things. And so, what we've seen is that people who take responsibility for their actions, they absolutely lean right. So are they neo-Nazis and white supremacists? Of course not. But if you lean right, mainstream media, especially like a MSNBC, is going to say that that's obviously a step in the direction of white supremacy and Nazism, right? Or Nazism. And so this is ridiculous, obviously. The other problem is this. You guys probably have heard this, but the average man in America's testosterone is 50% less than his grandpa's was.
Yep.
Interesting, because that's what we need to be able to have children. So it ties back very clearly to the very first article. It's like, if we could just tell them to stop having kids, and then we could tell them to not be healthy enough to have testosterone high enough to have kids, that we could actually kill two birds with one stone. What we don't want is we don't want toxic masculinity. We don't want hypermasculine men. We don't want patriarchy. We don't want male headship or leadership or any things that we're called to. Biblically, what we want is people who are sheeple, who will do the things that we tell them to do. And if we can do that, and this will probably lead into it, I think we're going to talk about the water and the chemicals and all this stuff. All these things are obviously connected. And I'm not, people that know me know that I'm not a super conspiracy theorist at all, but it's just the worldview of that side. The worldview of that side says, let's not have kids. Let's not have strong men. Let's be as not just non-patriarchal. Let's not even be complementarian. Let's be egalitarian. Everybody's the same, right? You can be anybody you want. You can be a man. You can be a woman. You can be what. And so this fitness thing of lifting. And by the way, so we train about 30 to 35% of our clients are female. About 40% of my coaches are female, right? And so what they don't want is what's crazy about this is that our males and our females, they train basically the same. They squat, they deadlift, they bench, they press, they do chin-ups, they do all the hard stuff, right? Oddly enough, they don't respond the same to those things. They don't respond the same to those things because their hormonal milieu is not the same. And so when a woman says, and I hear this all the time, I don't want to lift because I don't want to get bulky, you're like, that's not possible. If you see a girl who's bulky, there's only two potential ways to do that. One, she weighed 300 pounds or 280 and she's lost 50 pounds and now she's 230 and she looks bulky, but she is way healthier and in a way better position than she was when she was 280 or 300. Or two, she's taking steroids. And that happens a lot, right? And so we will happily give testosterone to females to let them become more male, but we will not happily give TRT replacement to males who need it. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about supraphysiological doses of testosterone. I'm not talking about turning you into a bodybuilder or Barry Bonds. I think that's wrong, right? But for men who naturally have low testosterone in their 40s or 50s, or they're trying to have children and they go and they get their testosterone checked and it's at a female level. It's not normal. This is not okay. And so I think all these things are tied together. So for us, the first thing we do is we get people lifting and doing hard things. We talk a lot about voluntary hardship. Voluntary hardship is a core value. Unfortunately, I hate to say this, but it's true. It's a core value of the right. It's a core value of Christian communities. This is why we found a niche in conservative Christian communities. Barbell Logic trains thousands of people. Certainly, there's many of those that are not in the Christian conservative community, but the niche is so similar because it fits the lifestyle agenda. It fits the core value. And so when someone wants the government handout, when someone wants the welfare, when somebody wants the minimum living wage, when somebody wants those things, like, what would make you want to go make your body better? And so then mainstream media takes that and goes, well, that's obviously a white supremacist core value. That's ridiculous. It's just taking personal responsibility for your actions. That's all it is. So, yeah.
Matt, I want to know, just as a quick question in there, what would you consider an appropriate TRT dosage?
Well, it depends on what your testosterone levels are. So again, one of the problems, if you go get, so I would tell all men that are listening to the show, if you're in your 40s for sure, and probably in your late 30s, but anything beyond that, you should go get your blood checked every year, and not just testosterone. You should get your full blood lipid profile, HbA1c, which tests for diabetes and prediabetes and all those things. And so the problem is the middle of the bell curve for testosterone has shifted left. So your grandpa would go and his testosterone would be 1,200 nanograms per milliliter, and yours will be 450 or 500, and your doctor will say that's normal. It's not normal. It's normal for today. It's not normal for 50 years ago. It would not have been okay 50 years ago. And so if you go and get, so if your testosterone is 250 or 350 or somewhere in that ballpark, you will probably get a prescription for testosterone from your doctor. But often if it's 450 or 500 or 600, you won't. And that's still very low testosterone. So your testosterone should be 1,000 or 1,200, somewhere in that 800 at least, somewhere in that. So let's say 800 to 1,200, somewhere in that ballpark. And so if that is where you're at, you're fine. But if you're well under that 800 to 1,200 window, then an appropriate dosage for testosterone would be maybe 100 milligrams per week. And some of that depends on the ester that's attached. So testosterone itself doesn't have the ester that gets attached gives it the half-life. And so for most prescribed testosterones, it has about a 1 week half-life. And so they do that so they can do weekly injections. So you can do a weekly injection from your doctor. For most guys that get that, they get an injection from their doctor once a week for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then you say, can you just teach me how to do this myself and just sit at home with me and I can give myself my injection in like my belly fat or my butt or my shoulder or whatever. And so about 100, somewhere between 100 milligrams and up to 200 milligrams per week, depending on how low your testosterone is. Over 200 milligrams per week would be what I would call a supraphysiological dose. Now, to put it in perspective, professional bodybuilders take 5,000 milligrams per week, 5 grams a week. So I'm talking about 100 to 200 milligrams compared to 5,000 milligrams or 5 grams. So we're talking about a massive, massive difference. So again, I want to be clear. This is not trying to turn you into a competitive bodybuilder or like a Barry Bonds or something like that. That's on another level. We're talking about replacing the testosterone that you should already have in your system so that you can be in the middle of the bell curve as a male. That's it. That's all we're talking about, right? And at this point, the good news is that world, the mainstream media hit its peak with kind of the Mark McGuire and Barry Bonds and all that stuff sort of in the late 90s and early 2000s. At this point, if you're in your 40s and you have low T, you should be able to get a prescription from your doctor for that thing, right? And so if you have a doctor that don't want to do it, if you have a doctor at 70 years old, and sometimes you'll have that and hasn't stayed up on the what's been the published material, you might not get that. I would just say go to a different doctor. So I will say this, and I think it's important, and I say this on most podcasts that I go on when they ask me about this. You do have to understand, and I think it's important from a Christian conservative perspective, if you have very low T and you go on testosterone, there are potential side effects. Now, there are the physiological side effects are actually extremely low at that level, but the psychological, emotional side effects are a little more intense. And so, if you struggle with lust, if you struggle with porn, if you struggle with going to the beach and seeing women in their bathing suits, like, that's something you better be really careful about and pray about. I'm really serious about it, because it's a little bit like going through puberty a second time. It's certainly not as much. It's still significantly less of testosterone than you had when you're 17 or 18 years old. But I want to be clear. I'm not telling Christian men all over the world to go get on testosterone, because I think it is actually dangerous. I think if that's a struggle that you have, it actually might be better to be low in T than to struggle with the sin of pornography or cheating on your wife. Or, I'm like, obviously we don't want it to go that direction. So I would be careful with that. So I would err on the side of too low a dose first, see how it changes your blood profile, and get it tested every few months, and then try to get it up to the middle of the bell curve. So you're just in the middle. That's fine, right? You don't need to be on the high end of that.
That's really good. Thank you so much, Matt.
Sure.
Now, the article talks a lot about how the rise of fitness influence is a result of basically mental health issues coming from COVID, the isolation, the struggles that people had during COVID. Now, there's lots of advocates for exercise, like Andrew Huberman comes to mind,
Sure.
neuroscience, that are looking at the way that exercise promotes both testosterone levels as well as norepinephrine and endorphins, even adrenaline intake, that can influence mental capacity.
Sure.
Now, Wade, I want to get you in here on this conversation too, because it's been a while, but I want to know, what capacity do you think the mental health of our community, the mental health of our society is bettered by exercise, and why would there be an effort to decrease and diminish that mental health?
It's a good question. I think that this article is probably not designed to convince people who are already exercising, or people who, to stop doing it, or because, there might be some like scary door down the hallway that you don't want to go through. That's the white supremacist door over there. But I think it's probably just for people who might do it, to maybe, be scared away from it, but also just so that people on the left, or people who take MSNBC opinion columns seriously, for them to see people who are exercising and be suspicious, and then automatically think, oh, okay, well, he's like relatively trim. he's probably a threat to me. Yeah, exactly. So I don't see it like pulling people away from the right wing or exercise. I think it's just kind of solidifying their people probably a little more. And I think that there's obviously the like exercise and like self-defense, which is another part of this article that we didn't really talk about. Like MMA, they focused on the martial arts, like MMA and jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, is the kind of martial art where you're really encountering reality, where you're training at 100%. And same with exercise. Like, you can't sort of BS your way past numbers. Like, you actually know how much you can handle, and so the more you kind of live in either of those worlds, not that I'm an expert in those worlds, but the more you live in either one of those, you are constantly like hitting your own limits and recognizing, oh, I can't do this, or I can't do X. And also you're improving yourself. So yeah, of course, if they want depopulation, of course they're going to go like, also don't be strong and make sure you can't defend yourself. But yeah, it absolutely has negative mental health consequences. But if you can, have a pharmacological solution to those medical problems, rather than sort of self-sufficiency, or again, like then you can get, again, more ingrained in the system. If you're addicted to those kind of, that this is the only way. If I have depression, I take this pill. It's not that I need to work harder. It's not that I need to change my life. It's not that I need to go outside more. Any of those things. It must be the solutions that they already have prepared for me.
Yeah. To add on top of that, the pharmacological solution of testosterone, it doesn't work without the voluntary hardship of exercise. It's like taking a tanning supplement and then not going out in the sun. You don't like tanning supplements only work if you go out in the sun. Like your body still has to produce melanin, so it still has to have the stress recovery adaptation cycle of the sun to actually get tan. And it's the same thing here. So I think one of the things that's really important is that we are a culture who works behind a desk now, right? I run a fitness company, and I sit at this desk and work at my computer. Like, that's my job. And so, but my grandpa's job was to go be a fireman or a policeman or a farmer, or right. But that's not my job. Now, for some guys listening to this, that may be your job. Like, if you work on your homestead all day, you probably need strength training a little less than I do. But I need strength training because it's the physical voluntary hardship that I choose that refines me and makes me better, so that we know that our life is we are going to suffer, right? Romans 8 says, like, that's part of the, like, we are called to suffer, and involuntary hardship is going to come. Someone in my family is going to get cancer, somebody's going to die, somebody's going to get sick, somebody's like, I'm going to get fired from my job, you know, your wife is going to leave you, whatever the thing is, like, God forbid, all those things. But if I've never chosen anything hard, the thing about choosing voluntary hardship is that it always refines, and involuntary hardship doesn't. And we know that because, like, it can refine, but we all know the guys that went to prison and were never refined by prison, they got worse, right?
Yeah.
Or the people who got cancer, and some of them it refined them and made them better, and some of them it did not. And so when we choose voluntary hard things, and I don't think weight training is the only thing. I mean, I think there's other things that we can do. The reason we focus specifically on strength training is that it's the most general voluntary hardship that works for everybody. Like, I've got a lady, I trained her this morning. She's an 87-year-old lady. Her name's Miss Sybil. She plays the pipe organ in her Methodist church for the last 40 years, right? She's got double hip replacement and a knee replacement, and her whole back's been fused together. And that was all before she met me. And I started training her when she was 79, and she was struggling to get off the toilet. And I went to her house, and she made me biscotti, and we dipped biscotti in coffee, and I taught her how to stand up out of her dining room chair that day. And now she deadlifts 155 for sets of 5, and she's 87 years old. And so the thing is, like, that's the exception to the rule, but it shouldn't be the exception to the rule. It actually works for everybody. So if you just choose voluntary hardship, it doesn't have to be strength training. Maybe you want to go run 5Ks or half marathons. You want to do mountain biking or whatever, or rock climbing or whatever the thing is. Like, that voluntary hardship better prepares you for when your boss gives you the pink slip, or when somebody gets cancer, right? Like, it doesn't perfectly prepare you for those things. But what we found is we found tons of people that we've trained over the years that had never done anything hard in their entire life. And our grandparents did. And our great-great-grandparents did hard things every single day to survive, right? And so we don't live that life anymore. I'm sitting in my house in 67 degrees, air conditioned, on my 49-inch screen. Like, there's nothing hard about this. But no one's going to make me put a bar on my back and squat, because squatting sucks. Because it's no fun. It's no fun. And I squatted this morning with my wife, and we squatted and deadlifted together. And by the way, it was a great time for us. It's a thing that we do together. My wife is the most feminine, you would never know, soccer mom, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, curvy. Like, she's beautiful, but we lift together because it's a thing that we do that's hard together, and that helps refine us. And so, do I think it's the most important thing in the world? I absolutely do not think it's the most important thing in the world. But I think these things are important. And so, interestingly enough, if you listen to the left, they don't want you to do anything hard. They don't want you to be refined at all. They don't want you to have normal testosterone, or God forbid, high testosterone, or you would actually be a masculine, a toxic man who would lead their family, or some sort of like toxic patriarchy, or like all the things that were called biblically to be. And so for me, when I strength train, I can absolutely see that it helps me be a better husband and a better father and a better leader in my church. I'm in the eldership process right now in my church. And so all of those things are better because I choose to do hard things. Like hard things are going to come, like they come to all of us involuntarily. And I want to be able to better handle those things because I prepared myself with voluntary hardship. That's why we do this thing. And that's why the left hates it, because they don't want you to do anything that's voluntarily hard.
Even the article makes that connection, actually. So it says physical fitness training, especially in combat sports, appeals to the far right for many reasons. The first one it says is fighters are trained to accept significant physical pain. It's like but it sounds like, like it's a bad thing. Or like they're assuming that physical pain is like from without, like somebody's out there just whipping you or something. But it's like that pain isn't necessarily a bad thing, or that you didn't choose it.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
There's an interesting discussion that usually surrounds fitness when people are deciding whether or not to kind of go into weightlifting or other forms of training, where the rationale is, I don't want to go too far or I'll be injured. I'll injure myself. But what the evidence shows us in the medical basis is that if you expose yourself to greater hardship in this way, the voluntary hardship that Matt's talking about, you're fortifying your body, you're strengthening your tendons, increasing blood flow, increasing, like we said, the neurotransmitters that are going to promote healing, promote strength, promote the ability to endure, so that people who train regularly are able to heal faster from injuries. So even though
they're more
to
resilient,
a smaller degree,
right.
they may be, to a smaller degree, they may
exactly
be
right.
able to get injured, but they are also have a much greater capacity to endure those injuries, as well as the other injuries that life will inevitably cause.
Yep. I mean, you said it great. This is the message that I preach every day, which is that everybody that's listening to this has a bad back and bad knees. That's why I can't squat and I can't deadlift. Wrong. Sybil did. She's 87. Like, her back's fused together. She's got hip replacements and knee replacements. What do you get? Like, what's your excuse, right? So you can do this thing, and when we make our back strong, it gets more resilient and anti-fragile, not more vulnerable to injury. Like, all of our moms throw our back out all the time. They drop their keys on the floor, and they bend over and pick up their keys and they twist and I hurt, and I threw my back out. Well, she's not deadlifting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's why we do the thing. We make the thing strong so that it's more resilient and more anti-fragile, so that it's better able to handle those sort of things. Sure, of course, we still get little nagging injuries and muscle strains and whatever, but we're better able to recover from those things. And this is my issue with, we actually have a handful of all the coaches that work for me are unbelievable, and we've got a bunch of PhDs and DPTs, like physical therapists and whatnot. But my general issue with physical therapists are they're so terrified to get sued that they won't actually make anybody do anything that actually helps. So if you hurt your back, they teach you how to never use your back. Well, how does that make your back stronger? I want to make your back stronger so that the muscles around your spine support your spine and make your back stronger. That's the point, right?
It's like all of
and by the way,
right?
that doesn't automatically turn you into a white supremacist. Oddly enough, Sybil, not a white supremacist, 87-year-old Sybil. In fact, not at all.
I read this article.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to jump into the chat really quick here because we've been a little silent on them here. So just read a couple of these chats out. Shara Joel said, I used to train in martial arts and MMA. I guess I'm a hypermasculine white supremacist, even though I'm a Hispanic female. That is correct.
Yep.
Just learning
So
about
the
yourself.
Gracie brothers.
Yeah.
Devin said, live in the pod and eat the bugs. Now eat Z bugs. Eat Z bugs. Yes. And then Grog said, I want to know who is going to tell the Gracie family they are white supremacists.
Mhm.
That's sad. That is sad.
I got a question for you, Matt, concerning what you were just discussing. I've heard you say in other podcasts before that there's kind of like a minimum standard that you think would be functional strength for men, as being basically rounded to a 315 squat and a 405 deadlift as a minimum standard. can you discuss why those numbers, like to a lot of guys and girls who may listen, that sounds like astronomical numbers if they're not training at a high rate. So why
obviously
that?
everybody's different, right? So if you're built like a horse jockey and you're a 110-pound guy, it might be, those are big numbers. But here's what I'll say. Again, my 46-year-old wife, and I'm at Reynolds Strong on Instagram. You can see I was on it. I mean, again, she is the most feminine. You wouldn't even know that she's not like muscular at all. She just is a good looking lady, right? She squatted 347 and deadlifted 403. She's 46. Had 2 kids.
It's pretty incredible.
So if you're a guy and you're like, I can only squat 225 and deadlift 275, then you're a lot weaker than my wife is. And she's never taken drugs, and she's she's a soccer mom. We have 2 daughters. Like, she's not, I don't have 18-year-old boys in here competing with her either. Right. So those numbers are not that difficult. So somewhere in the ballpark of, you should be able to overhead press, military press your body weight. You should be able to bench press 1.5 times your body weight. You should be able to squat 2 times your body weight. You should be able to deadlift 2.5 times your body weight. Somewhere in there. So if you're the horse jockey and you only weigh 115 pounds, then that can adjust that a little bit. But it's the same multiplier. So you should be able to press your body weight, overhead press, 1.5x your bench press, 2x your squat, 2.5x your body weight on deadlift. Simple enough. And that is strong enough. And then when they get that strong, my clients get that strong. And I've trained like Eric Kahn from the Hardman podcast. I trained Brett McKay from Art of Manliness. I've trained him for 10 years. Right? Brett McKay deadlifts 635 and he weighs 220. Great guy, family guy, Mormon, like just normal dude, right? And so, I mean, I'll forgive him for the Mormon part, but so it's just like these are just. I think the crazy thing is that it's those sounds that they sound crazy. They sound like exceptions to the rule, but the reality is, if you just put in the time, it's longevity, right? Wait, how long have you done your show at this point?
February, so 5 months.
Okay, so we started our podcast in July of 2017. I've done 600 episodes. And we do, I don't know, 250,000 downloads a month of the podcast. It does pretty good. You know why it's done good? Because we've done it for 6 years. Because most people won't do it that long.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. It's longevity. If you are consistent and you do the thing, everybody wants to talk about programming and how should you lift, and yeah, that stuff's important, but it is so far down the line of consistency and technique. If your technique is good and you never miss, your program almost doesn't matter. You'll be fine. Right? And so just go in and do the thing. And if you do the thing, it's not the exception to the rule, it's the rule. Like, you'll get strong, you'll be healthy, you'll improve your quality of life, you'll be more resilient. That's the point.
So I'm going to throw this at you then, Matt, and we'll go ahead and read through this, and we'll react to this one a little quicker so we can get to that final article as well here. But I definitely wanted to touch on this because I think it's really important. Nearly half of tap water in U.S. is laced with hormone warping forever chemicals linked to cancer and infertility, major government study finds, with worst hit areas in Cali, Eastern Seaboard, Great Lakes, and Great Plains. Almost half of all tap water sources in the U.S. are laced with toxic PFAS, forever chemicals, according to a major official study. Experts said the findings were frightening, given the scale of the problem and the link between the toxins and serious health conditions like cancer, infertility, birth defects, and hormone issues. In the most comprehensive study of its kind, research from the U.S. Geological Survey tested water sources at more than 700 locations across the country that's for the PFAs. I'm not even going to begin to butcher that pronunciation. These microscopic man-made chemicals can take thousands of years to break down in the environment or in the human body, hence the name forever chemicals. The report found that 45% of drinking water sources contained at least one PFAS, with the highest concentrations in the Great Plains, the Great Lakes, the Eastern Seaboard, and Central Southern California. So obviously, I'm not shocked to see that there is something in the water when we see so much of the hysteria going on right now with some of like the sexual confusion and the trans agenda and things like that. But Wade, I want to turn it over to you for your initial reaction to this article first.
Yeah, I think the only solution to this is if we turn over the water supply to the government. I think that's how we solve this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think yeah, more government power, I think, will solve all of these problems. But yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. All of these like things being a part of the way, like, yeah, it is wild how common those things are in the way we kind of maintain everything. And it again, is no surprise that it's everywhere. But yeah, the whole forever element of it, I don't know how that is solved. Again, other than more government power.
Yes, naturally. Matt, what say you?
It's a mess, right? I mean, it's a mess. And I think the one thing I'll say that I think will probably, so I'll say maybe it's my first thing that'll tick off your audience is that I do think these things are important. I think for sure you should figure out where your water source is coming from, and if you're not drinking well water, you should have a good filter for your water. And you hear a lot in our community about seed oils and soy and all those sort of things. And I think, like, yep, all bad. Stay away from it. But I'm amazed at the number of people who talk about those things who don't train and don't eat protein. And so let's not major in the minors before we major in the majors.
Yeah.
If you're
do
not
you discuss
training,
these things,
yeah,
Matt, do you bring these things up when you have a nutritional consultation
every
with
time.
your client?
Every time. So we approach both strength training and nutrition. We've kind of coined. I obviously did not invent this phrase, but minimum effective dose for maximum return on investment. So I'll look at what somebody's eating, and I'll go, oh, you're eating 60 grams of protein a day. You need to eat 200 grams of protein a day. So I don't attack seed oils first, ever, or chlorine or fluoride in the water or whatever, or soy. Like your miso, I had miso soup tonight at the sushi place. I don't know if I should confess that and deal with that before communion on Sunday or whatever the thing is, right? So it's like I'm probably fine. Like, so
you're safe here, yeah.
So I think that one thing that our community can get caught up in is some of these things, which they are important. I think the chemicals in the water are bad. I think seed oils are bad.
They're turning the
soy
frogs
is
gay.
bad. Like, yeah, that's right. They're turning the frogs gay. That's right. Thank you, Alex. And so those things are bad. But then they don't train. They don't lift. They're 50, 60 pounds overweight. It's the quote unquote fat pastor. They're eating fast food 3 times a day, but they're trying not to. But they're filtering their water. Like, okay, let's do the big stuff first, right? Eat 200 grams of protein a day, which, by the way, is not that easy to do. And let's strength train. Let's get those 2 things out of the way first. And then, sure, let's focus on, like, yeah, let's not eat seed oils. And let's make sure we have filtered water or good well water from the house, and or cut out the soy. Or now listen, it's a little bit different. If you got a baby at home, and for some reason, again, I realize that you should be breastfeeding if you got a baby at home, but if you can't, sometimes you can't, right? Sometimes something happens. You should not be feeding your baby boys soy formula. That's a terrible. I would elevate that one. That's a big deal, right? You take these infants, something happens, they're in the NICU, mama can't breastfeed them for 2 weeks, so they never breastfeed, and then you give them soy formula for the next year. That's a bad deal. But all of these things, while they are very important and they fall right under the same leftist agenda that we've talked about, I think are still minor things compared to the major things, which is, are you choosing voluntary hardship And are you eating enough protein to actually get the job done first? And then we start to do what's the next habit, minimum effective dose for maximum return on investment change.
I was sad to see this article because I just had a big plate of PFAs for dinner.
I sprinkled it on your Chinese food.
Yeah, I missed it. Yeah, I should have read this earlier.
That's awesome. I mean, it's just unfortunate that we even have to deal with this stuff in today's day and age. But, I can't say that it's shocking because it just seems to be, it just seems to be another offense on a long line of offenses that all seem to have the same theme. I mean, who's choosing these articles tonight? That's what I want to know.
Well, I mean, again, you get your water from the government. You got to expect it to. Has anybody ever gotten anything from the government that went well? Like, I mean, here's what's crazy about this is I've told this story on a podcast before. The first year my business exploded, which was 17, I owed a lot of taxes. And I got on the IRS website to pay a lot of tax. I mean, more taxes than I was paying more taxes than I made as a public school teacher 20 years ago. And I was like, and their website was so broken, it wouldn't allow me to pay them. I'm talking about high 5 figures taxes. That's how broken it is. And so when those guys are giving you their water, what do you expect? Like, it's going to go well? It's not going to go well because it never goes well.
Well, Matt, if you paid it on time, then you wouldn't have to pay the late fees.
That's right. That's right. So
it's a strategy.
They are hiring a lot of new IRS agents. I
heard that.
Yes,
I'm sure I'm on the
web
list.
designers.
Actually, in fact, I got a letter from the IRS just this week saying we would like to discuss your 2018 tax. I was like, 2018 tax? We're discussing those? I was like, I have to go send to my accountant and be like, am I being
every little bit helps?
2018? That's ridiculous. So yeah. So the same government who can't take your tax payments, which is crazy, who will send you to jail for not paying those tax payments. What do you know? They're putting chemicals in your water. Huge surprise, right?
They're like, we'll handle your entire water supply.
Yeah, it'd be fine.
Let's talk a little bit about what they're doing with that money. So this is from the dailywire.com. Trump, I'll give Ukraine more weapons than they ever got if Putin does not end war. Former President Donald Trump said during an interview over the weekend that his plan to end the war in Ukraine in just one day involves threatening to give Ukraine more weapons than they ever got if Russian President Vladimir Putin does not bring the war to an end. Trump made the remarks during an interview Sunday morning with Maria Bartiromo on Fox News' Sunday Morning Features. Bartiromo asked Trump to give details about how he would allegedly end Russia's war in Ukraine in just 24 hours. Trump started by praising Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky as being very honorable. You know what? They're just giving us the whole quote here. Let's go ahead and just hear it from Trump himself.
You said you could end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Yes, I could.
How would you do that?
I know Zelensky very well. I felt he was very honorable because when they asked him about the perfect phone call that I made, he said it was indeed perfect. He said it was, he didn't even know what they were talking about. He could have grandstanded, I felt threatened.
Well, that's not going to be enough for Putin to stop bombing Ukraine.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I know Zelensky very well and I know Putin very well, even better. And I had a good relationship, very good with both of them. I would tell Zelensky, no more. You got to make a deal. I would tell Putin, if you don't make a deal, we're going to give them a lot. We're going to give them more than they ever got if we have to. I will have the deal done in one day. One day.
Well, there we have it, straight from the horse's mouth, the orange horse's mouth. So to me, I found, first of all, I miss Trump. It's so fun to have him in the news cycle again. It's hilarious. Everything's a comedy show, in my opinion. His perfect phone call was great.
Perfect.
But
he would have talked about that the whole time. If she hadn't stopped him, that would have been the whole interview.
You know it.
Yeah.
You know it.
Just keep going.
Yeah. But what I find interesting about this clip in particular is a lot of people are attacking Trump for this, and I'm not 100% sure what to fully think about this just yet, because at the end of the day, I think the idea of peace through strength is obviously important. But at the end of the day, I'm just looking for a politician that would say, let's get the heck out of Ukraine. But I don't know. Then again, Trump's foreign policy. Maybe he knows what he's doing here. But Wade, I mean, enlighten me. Am I off here?
I think this is like pure art of the deal stuff. Like, I think he's just going like, I'm gonna knock this out, and like giving a couple bullet points as to how he's gonna make that kind of arrangement happen. Just kind of put the pressure. You have to put pressure on everybody in order for people to feel like they need to make a deal.
Have you read his book?
I have read Art of the Deal.
As have I.
I'm a better man for it. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's
that
all
was
that's
my
happening.
first thought too. After having read that book, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
well, at least he practices what he preaches.
Right. Yeah, it's exactly that. Like, I think it's all like negotiation. And what he's saying is like, I'll have it done in 24 hours, and this is probably what I'll say. And so I think that other people are saying like, we are going to give them as many weapons as they want forever, which is a different thing from saying, I will stop it in 24 hours. And here's what I'll threaten to do in the meantime.
On each side. Yeah.
Something we loved about Trump before, as far as foreign policy, you know, it was such a epic line when he said, go ahead, press your button. My button's bigger.
Yeah.
But now it kind of seems like he's saying, you better watch out. I'll give my button to Zelensky. What? That doesn't ring as well as we'd like it to.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, you're right about that.
It's like what he said didn't match really what his foreign policy was when he was president, right? Like he kept us out of wars. And he says this thing that you go like, wait, hold on, that sounds real dangerous, and we don't want any part of that. And so I'm with you guys. Like I don't think we should be anywhere near there. I think that obviously I'm the strength coach, right? So what do I know? Every time we expand NATO, it freaks me out. Finland joined NATO last week, right? And every time we keep moving east, I think this is not now. If Finland goes to war, we go to war. And this is really ultimately over the fact that Ukraine wanted to be part of NATO. And Putin said, that's the line in the sand. And rather than us saying from the very beginning, like, hey, listen, NATO's off the table, and we probably could have got a deal. But the real problem here is like we don't have anybody that does diplomacy anymore. We're like, why? Diplomacy actually matters. And so what's crazy is I don't understand how Trump can be diplomatic, but the reality was he was somehow able to sit down with other leaders across the world and keep us out of wars and what seemed to have like good relationships with other people. I would have giggled if I were in a business meeting with the guy. Like I just would have been like, this is ridiculous. But the reality is that he did those things. And so what he's saying here is not what he followed from a diplomacy sort of standpoint. If we had somebody to go in and just say, look, like this is like Zelensky, NATO's off the table. Like it's 15 years before we're going to talk about it again. Like it's not on the table anymore. Then I think you've got someone who could come in and start to give Putin a reason to sort of back off and go, look, like we're not going to. But the problem was we said we weren't going to move 1 inch east towards Russia, and we've continued to do that for the last 5 decades. And so we lied, and we continue to lie, and Finland's, north but east. And so so every time somebody new joins NATO, I go like, now we have someone else that if they go to war, we have to go to war. This is a problem. And so, yeah, we need to be out of there. I don't know. Well, I agree with you. I think it's art of the deal stuff. He's a business guy. He's going to sit down and do business deals, and he's going to try to get the thing worked out.
Yeah. Well, even talking negotiation is a better step than what we've been doing, which is we will not negotiate with Vladimir Putin.
That's right.
He's Mr. Bad Guy.
That's right.
But like, again, Trump having any relationship with Putin that wasn't just purely hostile is probably better. Again, being friendly with both people probably knows what levers to pull, and being able to like say Zelensky, I think the quote was, I would tell Zelensky, no more, you got to make a deal.
Yep.
Like that's, I think progress. And even if again, like the things he said wouldn't be things that we would, if he followed through on the threats, we wouldn't want that to happen.
Sure.
But like at least the negotiation is
occurring.
He's open to it at least.
Yeah.
We'll see if it happens.
I think what's interesting is watching the DeSantis camp really try to hammer him over this, because what I find interesting is I don't know if any of you watched the summit on Friday with Tucker Carlson interviewing all the candidates with the exception of Trump.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is I feel like DeSantis pretty much gave the same answer. He really talked about peace through strength, and I think that's ultimately what both of them are projecting here. But of course, this is kind of just a moment where DeSantis is trying to punch at Trump from the right. Or at least his camp is trying to punch at him from the right. I don't know. I find it interesting, but I mean, Wade, you follow a lot of this stuff. What's been your take on kind of the DeSantis campaign thus far?
Yeah, I think that specifically on that answer on the Tucker thing, I thought that his answer was a little weaker in terms of. I mean, we had, I think right before him, Vivek came on and said like, we need to be out of there. Let's get out. And his talking mainly about where the funding was going and how it should be going a different way. I think it was just, again, a pretty stark contrast. And the audience, I think, was way more on the side of Vivek and that whole thing. And I thought also, as a side point, DeSantis, right after Vivek said, like, I would, as president, I have the constitutional authority to disband the FBI, and the whole crowd cheered. And then DeSantis came on and said something about like, we need a new head of the FBI.
Yeah,
like,
I saw that.
I totally missed it, man. And that would have been like a great, but it was a great moment for Vivek and kind of a lackluster moment for DeSantis, I think.
Yeah,
overall.
I thought similarly, and it was disappointing because I actually felt like when DeSantis got up there and started talking with Tucker, I actually felt like it was one of his better performances up until that point. I was like, yes, this is why you are such a good governor and why, so many people thought you should run for president. And the moment he started talking like, we're just going to have a new head of the FBI and the DOJ, and kind of talking more like reforming. And what was really interesting is Vivek actually talked with Glenn Beck afterwards, after he was done with Tucker. And he specifically said that he's going to shut down many of the different institutions, including, I believe he said, both the FBI, the Department of Education, and for a lot of these other agencies, he's planning 75% cuts to their staffing and moving a lot of them out of DC. And it's like, to me, I don't know if Vivek can hold to those promises, because obviously we're used to disappointment by this point. But it was definitely interesting to see the contrast between him and DeSantis as Vivek's starting to climb in the polls. Yeah. Michael, did you? What was your overall take with Trump and Ukraine?
I kind of gave it already. It's good perspective, I think, and it's validating to hear Wade say that it's the art of the deal, because that's very much what's going on here. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm not crazy. That is how it came across, and that's what it sounds like. So I think to stake a claim and say that's exactly what he's going to do, he's just going to throw more money at it, well, that's not really a good deal either. So I think there's
and there was like
unsaid.
I think Trump in some speech at one point said he was going to like execute all drug dealers or something, and I think like that was another thing where it was like probably just again overstating and just trying to make people scared that he like the good guys would be excited about him being tough on crime.
Trump is a very volatile individual, and that's why people call him such an extremist. It's because he gives very extreme measures as his responses. And sometimes he makes true on them, and other times I think what we thought when he was originally elected as president, myself and many others thought, oh crap, his foreign policy is going to be horrifying because he's so extreme.
That's a great point.
But it turns out his foreign policy was
got it done.
It was really
the best in our lives.
It shined really well compared to anyone's expectations.
I was just listening
to what we have now.
Yeah. I was just listening to a radio show from 2017 or 2016, right after the election. And at that point, I didn't remember this, but it was a really tense time between the U.S. and Korea. And like, there were just really like, nobody knew what the Trump relationship with North Korea was going to look like. But it actually ended up being
ready for Red Dawn.
Yeah, right. Exactly. We had no idea. It was like, I guess he has the button now, whatever wants to do with it. but it ended up being he was the only president who ever just had a decent
went and met with
relationship with the guy.
Kim Jong-un and everything was fine. And you're like,
Yeah,
what did you guys talk about back then?
Yeah.
I know. It was amazing.
I'm sure there were scary threats like in those back
Sure.
dark rooms. Like
Sure.
who knows? What
He was probably just like, man, look at this real estate that you have here. You should just set up some Airbnbs and forget about the whole building your own nuclear warheads thing.
That's right.
Honestly, though, that was great imagery, seeing him go across the demilitarized zone. I mean,
I've been there. You guys ever been there? It is terrifying.
Oh, I have not.
Yeah, I went to. Well, I haven't gone to North Korea. I've gone to South Korea, but you can go right to the demilitarized zone, and it is like the world's biggest parking lot where there's nothing. It's bizarre. And as you travel north from Seoul, there's just more and more of these like massive like gun turrets more and more. So there's more of an army presence in South Korea as you get closer and closer. And you get to the demilitarized zone. It's just this massive concrete across the entire country for I don't know what it is, a mile deep, couple miles deep. And you can see it over there, but you can only go to a certain spot. And there's a spot where you can't go onto the concrete anymore. And the concrete, it's just this massive parking lot, basically, where there's no cars, right? It's just like a big concrete place. And that's the demilitarized zone. And it's like there's this little window between the two. It's really bizarre. So yeah, they think that he went over there and talked to this crazy dictator and like, yep, everything's going to be fine. Okay. All right. I don't know what you're doing, but keep doing it, I guess. So
art of the deal.
Yeah.
He sold the book. Now we can all read it.
That's right.
Yeah. So Wade, now that we're talking boots on the ground, are you excited to are you going to jump in? Are you going to go over to Ukraine and join in the fight?
Yeah. Yeah, I've got my Azov battalion tattoo. I'm ready to go.
Oh, you'll fit in. I mean, I did see in that other article we read from the MSNBC article, they did say that Ukraine was one of the places that so many of those right-wing extremists were starting the MMA gyms. So, there we go.
Who knows? Yeah.
There we go. It seems like we all have our marching orders at this point.
There you go.
I can't believe that we're actually potentially sending boots on the ground, or I mean, we're sending, what was it, 2,000 troops to Europe?
It's 3,000 people to Europe in response to the invasion, but not on the ground. So it's like it's the most roundabout way of saying like they're there to help Ukraine in the war against Russia, but we are not. We can never say that.
Fight in the war against Russia.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, great.
These 3,000 people just twiddle their thumbs somewhere in Europe and do no military action.
They're just eating out sack lunches, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Spreading democracy. Who knows?
So, what do you guys actually foresee being the closing to this Ukraine chapter?
I think it's one of the two. It's this. I mean, I'm really worried this is a forever war. I really am. This is one of those that's going to just last for decades. I hope it doesn't. I hope whoever the next president is can come in and make the deal. I mean, part of the deal is that Putin's not going to live much longer, right? Like we don't know how sick he is. He's probably got cancer. And we also don't know who's coming after him. And this is the other thing. Is like the person that comes after him may be worse. We don't know. And so, obviously a deal has to be made. I mean, you're gonna have to make a deal over Crimea and you have to make a promise to Russia that Ukraine's not going to be part of NATO. They're probably going to have to give up Crimea. You're going to have that's what's going to have to happen. But if they won't move on that, then we may be doing this for the next 20 or 30 years. Yeah. It's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, I think both sides and our government have been promising a swift end for the last, however long it's been going.
2.5 years.
And yeah, right. And so it's either a deal is made, like where there's specific terms and everybody agrees to them, or 20 years, trillions of dollars, weapons over there, and then Russia ends up with most of which a ton of our weapons and technology. We lose, we pull out. It's like we've done this before.
Yeah, a couple times.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I wish that weren't true, but it seems this is the world that we live in, and unfortunately, between the depopulation scheme and the forever wars, it seems that all we can do is try our best to work within our local spheres, like you were saying earlier, Matt. And I think that's really kind of the theme for this night, is to control what you can control, and to, I think it's important to be aware of these global things. I think that's the big struggle for most people, is to what degree, they should spend their time and effort being engaged in these global national issues versus, their local communities. And finding that balance is always hard, because I think some of us are called to address the more global issues with our talents, but the majority of us are probably called to do local, and yet it seems the majority of us are the ones focused on the global and worried about what's happening overseas, as opposed to what's happening in our backyard.
Yeah, that's to speak to that really fast. Like, out of the four of us, I'm like, the three of you guys do this really well. Like, you talk about these big macro issues, and for a guy like me, I'm a strength coach, right? And so, but when you sent me these are the articles that we're going to talk about, I was like, I know these issues. I keep up with, because I watch and listen to shows like yours to be able to do those things. I don't have to do that very much. So I spend half an hour a day, a few hours a week, making sure I stay up to date on the things that are going on in the world. And then I get to focus on my family, my community, my church, and those things. And then, of course, my business. And so I'm very grateful for guys like you who do this, because they inform guys like me, so that I can come to the table and have a conversation and not sound like a moron, because I actually can take a few minutes and listen to these things. And so it's not that hard to find a handful of good podcasts, good shows that keep you informed on that macro level. And thank you to all three of you guys for doing that, so that guys like me can come in and say, like, yeah, I talk through this stuff. Like, I stay polished up on this stuff well. So not as well Matt, as you guys do, but it works well.
Matt, you've got chickens to slaughter, so we all
That's
know
right. That's right. I got to
exactly.
kill some chickens and raise some girls and get them married and have lots of grandbabies and take dominion.
That's the best.
So the other side of that coin is that we have the opportunity to speak truth, and Connor and I have discussed this about what the purpose and the benefit of even putting on a podcast is. So we have the opportunity to be a voice in the giant pool of voices, and Lord willing, we can honor God, pursue Christ in the midst of that, and live lives worthy of the calling. And Matt, what you're doing on, I think, a more itemized scope is, we say, okay, when you start living this way, when you decide to take weightlifting seriously, how are you going to do it?
Sure.
And the content that you put out and the Barbell Logic puts out is quality. So
thank you.
It's all part of the scheme.
Thanks,
yeah,
guys.
It really is. Each one of us has a role to play. That's
Yeah.
for sure. And I've got a rooster that needs slaughtering too. Roderick,
I can show you how. It doesn't bother me at all.
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready for him. I don't even know if I'm going to give him a killing cone. I don't know if he deserves it. So.
You know, the first time we did this, we were watching the Dahmer thing on Netflix, whenever that came out a year and a half ago. I told my wife, I was like, I just go to like this weird place where it doesn't feel like an animal anymore, and I'm just like, and she's like, I think you might be a serial killer. She's like, you're just like, you got a problem with this. So yeah, it was nuts. So anyway,
well, see, my rooster, I found out he's abusing my hens. I was reaching out to a few people on Twitter and sending pictures of my hens, saying what the heck is happening. And John Moody and Jake Wolke and a couple other guys, they were replying, and they gave me all these reasons for it. Oh, it could be mites, but he's the only one that is not bald. Turns out he's actually just been roughing up my girls all the time. So I've got a couple of his sons. They hatched in incubator. So as soon as one of them's old enough to take over dad's role, he's going on my dinner plate.
Yeah. Make sure you get a picture.
So the moral of the story is don't be a Roderick.
You got to post it on Instagram.
Roderick is scrappy. Yeah.
Very scrappy. He murdered Jorge, the other rooster before him. So, he's he's a white supremacist. He's a racist. Racist, white supremacist.
Jorge.
Yep. This is the lore of Roderick.
Strong.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you guys for the conversation tonight. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you. And we'll go ahead and have you guys go around the horn and tell the audience where they can find you. So, Wade, where can people keep up with you?
Yeah, I'm Wade Stotts on Twitter and Wade Show with Wade. You can just search Wade Show on YouTube. and that's where we do 5 to 10 minutes of kind of running through the headlines from the week, and it's a sort of news entertainment show. We have a lot of fun.
Awesome. Matt, where can people find you?
I am at Reynolds Strong on both Instagram and Twitter. And then, of course, and that's my more personal stuff, Barbell Logic. You can find us everywhere. We've got YouTube, podcast. We've put out a ton of free content. You can obviously go to barbelllogic.com, and we'd love to have you as clients. But I always send people to the content. Since we're a service company, the content's always free, and it's well done, well produced, well made. And so it's a great place to start to learn and do that for free. It doesn't cost you $1. And so it's a great place to go. And you can always find me, and you ever reach out and send me a DM on Twitter or shoot me an email. My email is super easy to find online. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Awesome. Michael, where can people find you?
Well, I'm pumped up. You can find me under the barbell, but I'll go back and forth between reading John Wesley and being in the gym, which I pretty much do anyway.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching wherever you are. Feel free to like and subscribe, follow us, whatever platform you are engaging with us on. Thank you so much. We have been Forge and Anvil, and we will see you next time.